welcome everyone to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. This week has someone I've been looking forward to speaking to for a really long time. Dannie Carlone, dude, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a busy guy recently, so I really appreciate taking the time to have a chat.
Well, sure, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's great.
Well, I mean, dude, you have some big boots to fill. We've had, Nate on, we've had Ivana on, and they were really, really good. So, yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, no, those are awesome.
So, one thing I noticed, and it's going to be really cool to hear your, the thinking behind this. You haven't always been at Sony Santa Monica. You were over studios. You were at Sony for a while. Your contract finished up, and you left, and then you came back. I just want to hear, what's that like leaving a studio and coming back, and also all on good terms,
Yeah.
Did it feel weird? Was it did everything change? I just want to hear a bit about what that transition was like.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that was my second job in the industry. I, was working at Vigil Games for, it was my first job, and then, unfortunately, there was rumblings of hey, that the studio was going to shut down, and I was like, okay, well, I've always wanted to work at Sony. I've always loved God of War, and it was either I wanted to work at on a God of War game or a SOCOM game because I love Zipper Interactive.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I was, in the industry, that was not really an option. So, yeah, going there was amazing. It was a dream come true. I mean, I worked on God of War Ascension, and it was just, I loved every minute of it. It was great. I met people I still talk to today. It's awesome. And it's very inspiring to be there. It's man, you can learn so much just from observing. And so, yeah, game's over, contract's over. It was very early on in my career. So I just moved on to another studio and went to a couple places before I landed at Crystal. And then once I got to Crystal, I spent almost 6 years there, worked on, 3 games. Shipped 3 games there. Met some of my best friends in the world there. And then so now being back, it's it's interesting because you want to, one, you're no longer a junior,
mm-hmm.
You're now a senior, and you've been working in the industry. That was 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to, make a good impression. And I've always had good rapport with, the people there, and Nate and Dan and Shukru and all Paul, all the people, they were always so nice to me and so kind to me when I was a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
That really, I just remember being I really want to go back because it's the place for me that I felt the most happy making art.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I wasn't happy elsewhere. It's just it's a passion, it's a passion project that I really wanted to go back to for myself because it was a dream for me.
So speaking of being at Sony Santa Monica, I just want to. I had this experience where when you had an interview somewhere and there was the pressure of working on a title which had a lot of acclaim. For you, working on now on God of War, after what happened with 2018's God of War, everyone, it's one of the biggest games ever. It is so well. It set a bar for the industry. Is there any pressure? Do you put any pressure on yourself, or is there anything in the back of your mind where it's God, we've got to one up how well this was received last time? Does any of them sort of niggling thoughts creep in?
Well, of course. I mean, I think that's just the nature of being an artist. You want to always push yourself and be good. And because this is my favorite, game series ever, of course I put a ton of pressure on. I've always wanted to come back, and the stars aligned, this time I was able to come back, and I'm very grateful for that. And it's not lost on me, how many people want to be in my shoes and want to work at a place like this. So I really take that to heart and really try my best to do the best I can, because the artists here are incredible. You turn to your left or turn to your right when we were in the studio, and it's the talent is insane.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had a mentality of I don't care if you're, 5 minutes into the industry or 20 years in the industry, you can learn from anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned some amazing stuff from people who are fresh out of school. And it's oh man, that's awesome. So to have that knowledge from everyone there. They're just like, hey, how would you approach this thing? And they would go, oh, I would do it this way. And it's like completely different than how I would ever think to do something. That kind of stuff is really, really inspiring for me. And it's like, I love challenging my way of thought of how to make something. And so a lot of pressure for sure, but like I welcome it because I've always said that video games are my life, and it's how it is. I mean, I met my wife through, working through video games. She was, we both worked at Crystal, so
nice.
It's we spend most of our lives at work, and so it means a lot to me to like work here.
I have to admit, what you said, Red, there's a lot of people who love to be in your shoes. It's weird because it's like every job, every studio, they're attracting artists. When say, for example, if I was to, go on a hunt to try and find a new job, and you look through like, it's always like project. What's the interesting project? What's the good salary? And I don't think any of the studios really been able to replicate it as well as yourselves, and I think Naughty Dog really, in terms of having just the artists and the staff there be what attracts more talent. Like, I know for me, for example, like one of the dreams is to work in one of the studios just because of it being surrounded by every like you said, you look to your left and your right, there is every single person is an absolute like elite artist. And I don't see that being sold as much. I don't know why. It's kind of odd. Like, everyone knows who's the artist at Naughty Dog and who's the artist at Sony Santa Monica. Now we see, like, and to be fair, in the UK, studios like Dambuster did a good job of this, like, putting more of a spotlight on the artists and the staff. But I'm like, that's the big draw for me. If you show off what amazing artists you have at your place, that's going to be a draw to me, not just, the project or like, oh yeah, we're working on this really cool IP. It's like, okay, that's well and good. But the people I'm around is going to be what's going to keep me there. It's weird. No one else really sells it as much as Sony does. Like I said, we know the names of Sony Santa Monica and Naughty Dog quite, the household names to most environment artists. And it's weird. Like, that doesn't happen elsewhere in the industry. And I don't know if there's a reason for that. I'm not sure. But I digress. I'm going on I'm sort of speaking aloud there. One thing which is weird, like, not weird, I keep saying weird, it's not weird. Zbrush is a software. Yeah. You guys, the LA studios are renowned for like, okay, Zbrush is still very much here, and like everyone uses it, but it's like, it's special, you have to be really proficient in it for your studios. I don't know, did you see the MetaHuman stuff that got Unreal released this week?
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool.
So, it got me thinking, it's the same old narrative pops up every time, like, any new software comes up, it's the same conversation. People's jobs are going, blah, 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 blah. And it got me thinking with you guys, like, Substance Designer comes along, oh, God, that's it. Texture artists, like, all the ZBrush people, you're now obsolete. Like, you've gone through that cycle, like, you've been around through these development cycles of software. Did you feel that, like, oh, this software's come along, quote, my job's ripped now?
No. Never.
I never felt it?
I remember when Indu came out.
Yeah.
We were working on Ascension, and that came out. And I was like, oh, okay, it's just a script that helps you get your base down in Photoshop. Mm-hmm. That's cool. I mean, there was also a big thing of like, hey, everything's hand painted, like for a long time, like culture, like on Polycount and all that kind of stuff, which is also really cool. But no, I guess it never really bothered me because I've always looked at every program as a tool. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what program you use. Whatever's in game is what matters. And if the outcome of what's in game is consistent across the board and you're not taking an astronomical amount of extra time, mm-hmm. then it's almost irrelevant, like, to me at least. Because it's like, I love Designer. I use Designer all the time. I make purely procedural stuff as well. But when it comes to making like the chunkier stones and walls and all these things, I really like to sculpt all that stuff because it will always look how I want it to look. Mm-hmm. Because everyone draws different, everyone sculpts different, and I like how it comes across when I would sculpt. I guess in essential like my style or whatever. And I feel like Designer is really, really good. And I like looking at the strengths of programs and mixing those together.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's, and some people do ZBrush and Painter, which is really cool, which I've never like super tried. I've done a lot of more designer stuff just because I love, it's very like relaxing to do the nodes and stuff.
Very cathartic. Yeah. Well, it's kind of weird. Like I mean, for a long time, I was one of those guys who was like, for a long time going, 100% designer, 100% designer. Yeah. And it was talking to Ben Wilson, and he was just kind of like, yeah, but you have to, I did a material as use a marvelous designer. And I was like, I felt like cheating and I should have been doing it. And he like almost, virtually slapped me across the face. I was like, dude, who cares? Like, you got really good results. Like, if anything, it's better to know weak spots of a software.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because, ZBrush is not your pipeline. It's a tool within your pipeline, I guess, same for designer or anything else you might use. Just for, like, when you're using ZBrush, do you ever... So, I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I'll lean to a software because it's cathartic, it's fun, and I it's a little bit more enjoyable versus, like, say, fully procedural route or any other sort of software route. Do you sometimes do that as well? Like, okay, I could get some designer and maybe it's a little bit bad, but you know what? I just really enjoy ZBrush. I'm just going to lean into ZBrush a little bit more, or vice versa.
Yeah, I think that's a natural thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you're more comfortable with is what you'll do. Like, I remember a buddy of mine taught me designer at Crystal, just like on free time. It's like, hey, you kind of understand this. Can you show me how this works? Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, it's kind of like node-based Photoshop. I'll show you how to do it. I was like, okay, cool. And, I lean into ZBrush because I love sculpting. And I'm also a lot faster in ZBrush than I am in Designer because I've used ZBrush for so long. Like if I was going to make like a very chunky ground like I do in ZBrush, like I can basically, to sum up, at Crystal we have a really short timeline for a lot of our games, and basically I had to get a material done in a day.
Yeah.
Right. So I just got efficient at making those materials in a day, and I think that really helped me hone in what's important in the material, like what read is important, what I need to do there. And it's like, yeah, of course, when I'm at home, I'll do more noodling and take a lot longer, do all that stuff. I get to experiment, but the saying, like, time is not your friend when you're in production. It just isn't. So I think that was a skill I picked up without even knowing about it. And so I'll lean into ZBrush just because I am a lot faster at sculpting than I am about putting stuff in Designer. But then I'll take all my masks and bake everything out and take it to Designer. And I love that part so much. It's just so fun to take it in there. And I've made plasters and, muds and grounds, all that kind of stuff, like purely in Designer. It's very cool. But I'll also start with a height map that I made years ago in ZBrush. I'm like, well, I already have this thing. I can just scatter this in Designer. Like, I don't need to just make a new thing just for the sake of it. I was like, I have so many subtools I can just, quickly bake, bring it in there, and I'm done. And I can scatter those anywhere I want. Yeah, so I like using both strengths for sure.
Yeah, I've definitely, my eyes have been opened up, especially to the when you say scattering with like foliage and using like mega scans. Like, you could, like, I'm not the best organic sculptor, and I really don't like using Designer to make leaves and stuff like that. It just feels so cumbersome and like not right. And like, there's a material I'm working on at the moment, and it's just like, I got some mega scans through it, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm pretty close. Like, that's got me 80% of the way there. And I'm like, Jesus, that's so much quicker. And I was thinking about it, like, that was just at home, like a few hours noodling. And I'm like, in production, this is a dream. I'm like, this is a whole material in like 2 hours. I was like, okay, this is what's king. I've run into no. It's an AO material. Like, when you throw the albedo and the roughness on, I'm like, crap. It's anything that's pure albedo. I will never understand. It's the same with every, like, for props artists, it's the curvature render, the edge highlights with some AO, and like for us as material artists, AO shots of our materials look incredible in grayscale, and it's always like, I prefer them to, like, when you throw the albedo on. I want to see like a Mirror's Edge type game. Do you remember Mirror's Edge where they had the red highlights or everything? Yeah. It's all minimalist. Let's make an AO game where everything's just ambient occlusion, looks really pretty, cool. And then artists are really happy because artists don't have to worry about ruining their materials or assets with color.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Speaking of, I guess art direction. We've probably both. I mean, you've been around the block a lot longer than I have. But we've both probably worked in situations where you've kind of had you're working with somebody who has like a really clear vision, a very deliberate vision, and they're like giving you, like, I want this, and no, not that type of rock. I want this type of rock. Or vice versa, where somebody's like, okay, I just have like this broad thing, like, can you figure it out? Like, here's a problem, just solve it for me. How have you found that, like, in your experience of the years of working in all these different studios, that balance, like, which side do you lean on? Do you like being given just like a blank slate and, I'll solve everything? Or, do you prefer working where somebody's like, okay, here's the idea, make my vision come to life? How have you found that, like, treading that balance?
I guess I've never experienced the 100% here's my vision, make it exactly that way. I just don't think that's, in my experience, that has been the most realistic outcome. Yeah. But I think any game that is renowned for its visuals is because they have a really strong concept team and a really strong art director. My art director back at Crystal, Brent Adams, he's amazing, one of the best in the world, and he would do so many awesome paintings, and like, hey, this is the idea for this thing, and sometimes obviously stuff changes. That's how games go. You have to work around this design changing and whatever it is, and it may not line up with what the vision was on the concept anymore. Or maybe it was just a mood painting and there is no concept for what this other area is, but you have to use the mood painting. It's like, this is the inspiration. Go, and go in there and do that. And he was amazing at, like, if I had questions, like, he would just come to my desk and we would just powwow and do nothing but like, hey, let's move some stuff around. And he was so good about making you feel empowered as an artist and not like he was over your shoulder. So I love that as well. And then also when you have a lot of concept, it's really helpful. Okay, I'm going to make this. And then you can present that stuff. And you can also find like, hey, because some concept, it's there for inspiration. Some stuff doesn't functionally work.
Yeah.
And you go and you say, hey, I'm making this thing, but this piece right here, like it literally can't like function. It can't turn. It can't do this, And talk to your concept artist or talk to, the art director and say, hey, are you okay with me doing this and this? I've already mocked this up over here. Like, if you present them with a solve and not just a question, I feel like that's always been helpful. So do I prefer one or the other? Not really. I don't really mind whichever it is. I think I'm more of a person as I get used to what my environment is. And say, okay, this is how this is how it is here. So let's just go with the flow and figure out how to get better as an artist in the way they work here.
That's that point. The kind of, you want to come up with solutions. Whenever any of our mentees recently, it's been like that's a really good habit to get into. Like, if you see a problem, don't just call out the problem. Like, have some idea, have a conversation, have some ideas about how you might solve the problem. Because anyone in like a management position, they don't want somebody coming to them with a million problems every day.
Sure.
But there's a difference between somebody coming to you with this problem and now I have to think about a solution versus somebody being like, okay, here's a problem and here I've tried this and it didn't quite work, but maybe these two things could. And you start that dialogue. I think I understand it's intimidating for a lot of people. I imagine there's juniors out there who are like, it's intimidating, saying, okay, I have a problem and here's what I think the solution is. Because you have to basically stick your neck out on a limb and go, I'm saying I think this will work. But I think even just the intent. If someone sees you have the intent of I want to help and be part of the solution rather than just being like, problem, solve it, I don't know what to do, and throw your hands up in the air. I think it's a very powerful way of developing as both I guess more of a game dev than an artist. It's being a good game dev. Because the same with like, you work with tech artists, right? Like, oh, you can't do this thing because of optimization. You could throw your hands in the air and like, oh, okay, well, this sucks. Or you'd be like, oh, well, okay, so how do we get back to the original with working within the optimization limits? And it's like you have that dialogue. I don't think it comes naturally to a lot of people. I think we're all also game devs are quite introverted, right? Like, so it's like talking more than I need to. Shit.
Yeah, very much. I mean, I'm certainly a quiet person, so uh, it's definitely a it's definitely it's a thing of like a good lesson to learn for like a young artist is, yeah, go ahead and take the risk of, if something doesn't work, just mock up a couple ideas
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, I also did this thing. Even if they don't go with those ideas, it shows your art director, it shows your lead, oh, this person's like a self-starter. They're able to uh, not be afraid to put their ideas on the table, but
Mm-hmm.
also not be pushy about their ideas and just say,
Yeah.
hey, I also did this. What do you think of this? And they can go, yeah, that doesn't really go in line with what I want, or whatever it could be. But if you consistently do that, you're going to solve something eventually, and you'll also get better at analyzing what the problem is, because they could say, no, those don't really fit. The problem isn't like the style of that; it's more of the scale of another object or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever variable it might be, you'll be able to see people who are really experienced kind of slowly tell you the answer over time,
Mm-hmm.
and you go, okay, I can figure that out. Even so
I think it's also you kind of how to phrase it. You whenever someone, I think when you're like you have your art and you do a piece of art, someone says, okay, that's not quite in the art direction like I want. It's
yeah,
like, okay, that's really obvious. I get it. It's not in line with your direction. And you're like, okay, I have like a visual solution. Like, what do you think of this? And someone says, oh no, again, it doesn't work for whatever reason. I think people are a bit more that hits a little bit harder for some people. Even though it's the exact same thing, it's not a problem with your idea or it's a problem with your style. It's a for the grand solution, it doesn't quite fit
yeah,
the puzzle. Um,
yeah, totally.
I mean, I remember my first studio is like a gambling company, like making mobile games which had like
Oh,
gambling
okay.
elements. The guy in charge, the creative director, is like a real old boy. Like he's in his 60s, as a big gambler, and you're a very traditional British guy, like old British guy. And I remember every time I showed him a couple of ideas, and he's like, "Nah, that's shit." And I'm like, I was a junior, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. And my lead had to pull me to the side. He's like, look, honestly, he will tell him if it's not exactly what he wants, if it's not if it's not right, it's shit. That's it. There's no, there's no middle ground. He
Sure.
won't compromise. I was like, okay, okay. So
Brutal,
maybe I
yeah.
developed a thick skin from that, but I remember that experience the first time I showed him like this big idea, which I put a lot of thought into. And he sort of looked at it
Yeah.
for about 2 minutes, didn't say a word, just I stood next to him in silence. He looked at it and just gone, nah, shit, and just moved away again. I was like, all right, yeah,
Wow.
that was pretty brutal.
Brutal. Yeah.
But it's good. It was good though. Like it's kind of. I mean, that's an extreme.
Sure.
That's a very, very much an extreme. And like, he was a good guy. By the way, I say that. I love the guy. He was a really funny chap, and
Yeah.
we got on really well. It's just as a junior, my first job, that was like, oh shit, that was intimidating.
Yeah.
Um, but we've speaking on like actually design. We spoke off air a little bit. You mentioned something. You were saying about how you feel like environment artists should also be, competent in design. We haven't really dived
Yeah.
into this much, but I'd like because when you said that, I was like, oh shit, I haven't heard that very much. So it'd be really cool
Yeah.
to just kind of explore and explain that notion. Environment
Sure.
artists being competent designers too.
I think it's important as an environment artist to know that, when someone plays a game, the first thing they notice besides the character is the environment, right? We are a big part of the impression of the game, and level design is basically it's the bones, right? So if the bones are good, you're going to have a good experience. And uh, I really find it important because I play a ton of games in general, and I've worked with a lot of amazing designers back at Crystal Dynamics and currently here at Sony. Uh, Understanding why, like, if you're working with your designer and they say, "Hey, I want to move this, I want to move that, and I want to pull this area back or flip this completely to the other side, change this thing," I think it's important as an artist to go, well, why do you want to do that? Like,
Yeah,
what is, like, and understand it, not in a defensive way, but in a, like, legitimate, like, can you explain how does that flow make that better? Because I did that constantly with my designers, and because I was so interested in, because I play so many games and I find them to be fun, that, like, I want to play a fun game and I want to make a fun game. So being competent in, like, hey, like why they would change certain layouts and do certain things to make the flow better. It's really important to me. You have to think like a designer sometimes and say, if you're playing through an area and you're like, well, this doesn't make sense. Like as a player, I wouldn't want to do this, because that's what designers are doing. They're saying, hey, as a player, I wouldn't have fun doing this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I constantly would ask my designers, like, well, what do you think about this? How would you go about this problem? And I think over the years, it just made me realize that I kind of felt that way in general, because I do play an absurd amount of games. And, at a young age, I knew I wanted to make games, like really young. And so, there was a moment, working on, my last game at Crystal, and I was talking to my designer. I said, oh, hey, I think we should pull this back and do this and change this. And this is all like design type stuff. He goes, man, that's a really good idea. And I said, I'm just throwing back at you what you've told me over the years. Like, we talked about this like a month ago on something else. Mm. And he goes, oh, that's cool. So it's like, it's the camaraderie. It's the being close with your designers will make your game better, because design is first, no matter what. Like, I'm a strong believer in that. There's always been like, hey, I feel like there's been a conversation where artists and designers can sometimes clash.
Sometimes.
And, yeah. And I'm on the side of, well, it's important that design is first, because it needs to be fun. Yeah. It's our job as an environment artist to contextualize that space. If that space is unable to be contextualized because it's just like not plausible of what they're trying to do, then it's like, hey, let's solve this problem. Let's figure this thing out together and say, hey, we can make this design work, but we have to like throw out this wall or do this thing or break out this floor, whatever it might be. It's a puzzle. I mean, that's all we're doing. We're arting puzzles on a grand scale. And I've always felt that it's important to be really close with your designers and be competent in what they're saying, so that you can take that information and digest it and say, okay, I agree with you, but this might be better here too. Or say, okay, you're right. Let me move this art. Without destroying each other's vision, it's possible to do that.
I think a lot of the times when we antagonize each other, because it comes both ways. I imagine, there's always times when you open your level and you go, why the fuck have design done that? Or vice versa. They like design open a level and go, fuck me, yeah, it looks great, but that's going to be horrible to play in. Like, and a lot of that tends to, I feel like it comes from just a lack of communication. Like, any time where there's been a problem with a level in any studio I've been at, and you sort of just, okay, designer, like you said, explain to me what are you trying to do? And they explain it, and then you say, okay, well, here's what I'm trying to do. It clearly doesn't work. These two things don't mesh, so we need to find a solution. As soon as you I don't think there is this whole meme of like designers and artists hate each other. Only I think occurs when we don't speak. Like, I have never been in a meeting where the artists and designers don't get excited by talking to each other and they come up with great solutions. It's always when people do shit on their own without talking to each other and catch somebody off guard, people start to get annoyed. Like, I feel like that's where it comes from. And it's hard to facilitate it, right? Because it's like, you can't start that dialogue until both design and the environment artists have both kind of started. If that makes sense, like, they've both done their block out and the environment is in like an alpha pass. And then the frustration is coming because you're like, oh, this isn't working, blah, blah, blah. And then you remedy it. It's very hard to fix before the problem occurs, almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But but with the design side of things, like you said, it's important for environment artists to like, be considered as the designers. But what what actual design skills have you you said there's a few things you spat back at the designer from experience. What sort of things like do you consider when you're doing environment art from a design perspective?
I mean, especially when you're doing like layout stuff, like because composition is just as important to design as just art, because it will tell you where you want to go as a player. So like if the layout doesn't make sense, you can't throw like pretty art on it and then you know where to go. Yeah. So we have some really good designers back at Crystal in here as well. And just I'm calling a lot of moments from back at Crystal because one of my designers I worked with is incredible. His name's Rowan, and my other designer Grant. He's one of my best friends, and working on those levels, it was just so easy to be like, hey, even in like early stages, be like, hey, I feel like this isn't going to work here because of X, Y, and Z. Like this composition needs to might move over here, or maybe they had a goal. Say, hey, we have a pickup over here that like Laura needs to go get back on Rise of the Tomb Raider or something. And it was just conversation stuff. Like, am I in there doing scripts and doing all that stuff? No, I am trying to give my personal experience, because when you are making a level, you're laying out areas. You're being a designer in a way as well. You're like laying stuff out, and you're making that block into something that makes sense, right? And that block isn't always going to be the exact same position that it's going to be in. Stuff might need to move, and so to me, it's just always an organic conversation with your designer, and you say, "Hey, I think that this is stopping us from getting to something that could be even better," or vice versa. They go, "Hey, this art is amazing. This looks awesome, but can we move this stuff over to the left or right or here or that? This will really help us funnel to what we want to do."
Mm-hmm.
And it just needs to be, I think an easygoing conversation. And I think I got really lucky with the amazing designers I've gotten to work with, because they're some of my best friends. I love them to death, and they're, really talented at what they do. And, yeah, so I don't know. I feel like I have I'm empathetic to them trying to say, we want to make this game fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the gamer in you talking? You said yourself you play a lot of games.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because you're well, you said something off air, you said about the whole, if I want to see good art. Yeah, explain that bit. If I want to see good art, you go on ArtStation.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I love video games more than I can express. And if I wanted to play a game that just looks pretty and that isn't fun, I can just go to ArtStation for that. I can go scroll through the, thousands of posts of all these amazing artists across the world who I'm just like blown away by. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. And but there's been games I've played before that are like impeccably beautiful, but they're just not fun to me because I didn't feel like it was very strong on the design portion. And it's like, well, I would rather play a game that doesn't look as good, that is fun, like fun game. I mean, that's why, I play anything from fighting games to shooters to 3D action games. Like, I sunk like 600 hours into the last Mortal Kombat, like in 1 year. It's like, it's because they're fun, and because once you start playing games, like look, it's good examples of fighting game, right? Once you've played for a first couple hours, the graphics go away.
Yeah.
You're just playing the mechanics. And if the mechanics are fun, then you're gonna have fun. Like it's kind of that simple. And as a player, when you are playing through, as a developer, we talk about peaks and valleys in a game, right? Like you gotta have really strong content up front, really strong content at the end, and you're gonna have valleys throughout development. Because as a player, if you're playing a game for 20 hours or something, you're not going to remember every single moment. Like, oh, that looks really pretty. That looks kind of less, like this or that. So, but what you do remember is that it's fun, and that the loop of, hey, I'm going to go to this thing. I'm going to unlock this area. Oh, I need something. I can't get to this gate. It's very Zelda-like, like you're playing any Zelda game. Like, oh, I can't go to this area. I need an item. Or Resident Evil. I love Resident Evil series.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you need a key. It's like, well, where's that key? So I think that a game that has an interesting loop that hooks you and go, oh man, I need to find this item to unlock this area. I need this mechanic to then traverse the way they want me to traverse now, or as opposed to how I was traversing earlier in the game. To me, that's just addicting. And it's like, and I think good art married with design makes those experiences that much stronger, because we are visual people. It's no different than why people take pictures of their food on Instagram. Like we eat with our eyes, you know, and when people play games, they, you know, the environments are one of the first things they see. So, you know, if your food doesn't taste good but looks good, you're like, well, I won't come back here.
You know what? It's funny. You just mentioned Resident Evil, and it got me thinking about, from a design perspective, how much Resident. So I've been playing Resident Evil 2 remake, and
so good.
Yeah, I'm like, that police station like bit hasn't changed a great, like the core fundamentals have held up for nearly what's it been now, like 20
long time,
nearly for 25 years. But it's like, and games don't try, and I feel like games are some probably more modern games are like, it's challenging, it's intimidating to have a game where like, oh yeah, we're gonna just drop you in this maze and everything's locked and you have to navigate this maze to find the pieces to unlock these little doors. I mean, that game's hard. Like, if you don't know where the pieces are, you're running around that police station for a long time. And yeah, it's the kind of thing where like that design has held up for so long. Like, even though back then the art was, you know, with PlayStation 1 graphics, it's like, but even now it's like I still get the exact same emotional reaction playing them games. And I wish more did it like that. Like, cause I can't think of many games anything like Resident Evil 2 with just how far they go with the whole, you're in a maze and you'll find with the items to unlock everything. Just wondering, from like this whole perspective, like of, you know, design and games and all these sorts of things. You're a senior. Do you sometimes feel like you have to impart this? I don't want to say knowledge because it's not knowledge, it's perspective. But do you feel like sometimes this is a conversation you have with younger artists where you're like, okay, like, you know, I know every artist has to have some sort of ego, like we wouldn't be able to do what we do without it, but you're like, okay, art isn't everything, like, you know, we're making a project. Are these the type of conversations you tend to be having? Like, you know, don't worry about this problem, work with your team, design, all these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I work closely with Ivana, and you know, she's an amazing artist, you know, and I've plenty of times I've said, hey, you know, like, what would you want to play? Like, what about this isn't working for you? I kind of ask, I kind of ask people, you know, like, what. Basically, I don't try to tell people what they should do ever when I'm working with them. I usually say, how do you feel about it? Like, what's your opinion on the piece or whatever? And if they're having a trouble with, like, you know, like dev trouble or something, anything, the past, you know, 5 years, I've always been like, hey, what would you have fun in this area? What are you finding to be troublesome? Is it the art or is it the design that you're like fighting against? Mm-hmm. And if it's the design they're fighting against, okay, let's talk to the designer. If it's the art you're fighting against, like, I don't know how to make this piece, I don't know how to like get the fidelity I want, then that's a different thing. And you go, okay, let's make this asset what it needs to be, and I can help you with how I would try to go about it. But everyone works differently, and I think that's important, is that I never try to make people do stuff how I would make it. I would say, here's the end result of how I do something, and here's my steps of, you know, 1 through 10. Mm. But if you're doing different steps in the middle and get to the same result, who cares? Like, that's, you know, so like you said, it's perspective. It's not like knowledge. It's how I look at stuff, because I love making games so much and I love playing them. And I feel that the more I play them, the more I want to keep making them. Mm-hmm. You know, like Link to the Past is one of my favorite games of all time. And, you know, that game made me want to make games. It's beautiful. It's interesting. Like, the design is so good. And then playing Breath of the Wild when it came out, I was like, this is the reason why I love making games. Like, this is why, you know, this is what keeps me going. Like, man, really inspiring.
What kind of things, as it, like, just to like completely flip the script, there's stuff that inspire you, they're the things that get like fire you up. What parts of environment do you like? Do you hit brick walls with? The stuff where you're just like, oh shit, I need to do this. Like, there's a particular stage. So for me, for example, I hate polishing things. Like, I love macro stuff. I love lighting and I love like composition. But then like it comes to like having to detail something out, and I'm like, I don't know how. I have to like really think hard how to detail something out. And then I watch other artists and I'll show you, and I'm like, I watch them detail something out, and it's like, that's beautiful. Like, how did you come up with that recipe? Like, what the fuck? Like, so what sort of stuff, like, from an environmental perspective, do you still, because I mean, every artist has their, their strengths and weaknesses or likes and dislikes. So what's some of the stuff you like either struggle with or dislike sort of about environment art?
Yeah, I think closing down games is hard. It's very hard. You get lots of bugs. You get lots of, like things that you would never think of will pop up. Like, oh, hey, this tiny little piece thing here is like clipping through a character or something you'd never noticed. And you're like, oh man, that's really custom piece. I gotta go through here. I gotta do this. Like, the mental gymnastics that you have to do to be like, okay, let me figure this out. How am I going to do this? I don't want to make another instance of this mesh. I need to figure out how to do this smartly. And stuff like that, like, I guess that's never been like my favorite. Like, I do it because it is. Playtests are fun, but you always have to make sure like everything's buttoned up and everything's right. Like, it's not like super enjoyable to stop what you're doing to help a playtest, but it's so valuable to get that information because it will just make the game better. But I think closing out a game, I think that's kind of an easy answer because I think most people will be like, closing out's hard.
Mm.
But yeah, I love the polish phases. I love the broad shapes. Like, hey, I'm going to do this composition or whatever. But yeah, I think optimizing is never fun. You do it because it's necessary. It can be fun if it's like a puzzle that you're trying to figure out. Like, okay, I'm trying to get this milliseconds back. How can I do that? Okay, let me go through the bucket of ideas that we all share with each other knowledge over the years of how to get this. I don't want my G buffer to cry, so I need my I'm going to do like material LEDs, or I'm going to do all this stuff so that my normals, aren't reading from a bunch of meters away. It's like, stuff like that. Like, it's a necessity, but I don't enjoy it.
It's, what was satisfying and I find very interesting, even though I never want to do this is not something I ever want to do, is seeing tech artists do things. Like, one of ours is like handling optimization, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna do this small thing. And at first I'm like, that's gonna make that much of a difference. But like, when something's been repeated, say 2,000 times, and you're like, oh, that little tiny increment is like made a 20% save, and we have documentation saying, hey, look, here's all the saves we're making. I'm always like, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And like, stuff I do in like either landscapes or anything like that, it's always kind of like, even though I know I am not a techie person, it's why I couldn't learn Houdini. I got to the point where it's like, oh, you need to learn some programming now, and I'm like, I'm out. I can't do this. But seeing techie people come up with solutions, I don't know why, I find it very cathartic. Like, oh, here's this like really cumbersome, like complicated way to like save 2 milliseconds. And I'm like, I mean, I'm never going to do that, but that's fucking cool. I find that interesting. Almost more interested in seeing some kick-ass scoops sometimes. Like, we have a fantastic
really
asset team.
Like, tech art, man, they are
that's smart
the unsung heroes. They are, the stuff that they do. Like, I had this tech artist back on Tomb Raider, and God, man, like, he saved me literally weeks of work with one button. You just click a button, and I was like, I remember getting up, standing up, going to his desk, and being like, dude, this isn't me exaggerating. You really saved me weeks of work with your new scripts. Like, thank you so much. And it made optimizing really easy because we had to optimize for Xbox 360 for Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is really hard because that game was made for, at the time, current gen consoles, PS4 and Xbox. And so all these draw calls and all these things that we're doing, we had to make it work on Xbox 360, and that was just like. So when you asked me what I don't enjoy, I was thinking about those times. I was like, oh.
Tech art, dude. Honestly, it is not an exaggeration when I say they are like fucking wizards with how much they know. I remember, like, I felt bad, like when we got to the wrapping up on Godfall, and it's like we're tackling our bugs, and it felt awful because like our tech director Alan Lee, a really nice guy, and I always felt bad. I was like, okay, I've tried for like a day on this one bug, and I'm not getting anywhere. Alan, dude, I'm really sorry to bother you. Like, I don't know what's going on. He looked at it, he jumped to the call me, and he's like there for about 2 minutes. He's like, oh yeah, it's that. I ticked it. I was like, huh. How did you know that? He's like, I've been around long enough to have seen nearly everything at this point. I'm like,
yeah.
And like, what's really interesting is when you have two tech artists in a call, and you're flying the wall. Like we'll be sat in Discord, two tech artists start talking. I'll just sit there quietly, and I'm like, you're like speaking a different language. Like you're saying words I don't know, and you're putting words next to each other which I've never heard before. I'm like, yeah, these guys they're on another level. They really, really are.
Yeah.
That's why I don't want to do it. Like, I'm not smart enough for that, dude.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're coming towards the end. There's a question I always like asking people. I like to look forward. In the past, I was always like, oh, what do you wish you taught yourself when you were 18 or something along them lines? I'm kind of bored looking back. I want to look forwards. So, like, through 2021, I know you're a parent now. It's like, you probably all your attention is going to be on, like, day job and family. But is there anything else, like, you're looking to develop, to grow on, to get better at over the course of 2021? Anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, from a dev side, I definitely want to jump into Houdini.
Oh, really?
I really want to do that, kind of explore, because I've seen some really cool stuff that people have done. Like they made procedural rocks or something. Like I'd be really fun to like make that and then throw it into Zbrush for like the final like pass. That would be really cool. I think that's the big one I want to get into is that one. But I mean, like you said, I'm a parent, so my time is pretty much like if I'm not working, I'm with my family, So, and especially having a little one, just turned 3, so it's like, so he's got a lot of energy. I think just spending quality time with him and like even just like playing games with him and saying,
that's cool.
This is something that, me and your mom worked on. Like, let's play it, And it'd be cool for him to see his reaction to that. Be like, oh, that's cool. I'm watching, Pokemon with him right now. And it's cool to see like something I was so in love with as a kid. And he's like, this is great. All right, we watched one episode, but like I want to do something else. And it's like, I want to keep watching.
If honestly, one of the most, it's a very visceral memory from when I was a very young kid, like, toddler, sitting on my dad's lap watching him play on the PlayStation 1, Aliens Trilogy, the first Tomb Raider 1 and 2, Abe's Odyssey, Crash Bandicoot, and I don't remember much of my childhood, like, very young. We had this really bad TV where you couldn't turn it off. If you turned it off, it'd stay off, and you had to like trick the switch to for it to turn back on. But it's had this memory of just, I don't remember much. I don't remember the context. I just remember watching him play Alien and Tomb Raider, and it's like, it's such a visceral memory. But even now, like today, it's stuck with me. I don't know why. Like, I mean, I don't even see my dad, but it's like, it was very, it's a memory that stuck with me this whole time. So it's kind of crazy because I'm thinking, you saying that, like, damn, it might be forming their memories itself, like right now.
Yeah. Totally.
And you're doing the right things. Pokemon, it's a good start. I like that. That's good shit. What else is on the list? What other nostalgia things you need to revisit? Sonic, I guess. Sonic TV series are pretty good.
Yeah, I never watched that, but I should. Obviously, I've shown him Dragon Ball.
Oh yes,
that's one of my favorites. Like I don't have my figure here; it's at the office, but showing him Dragon Ball, I would love to do that and have him go through all that stuff. Have him play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was a good game. Show him the cartoon, stuff like that. I guess just whatever he's into, let him be into. I would love if he's into games, but I'm not going to force someone like, hey, you have to like this because like anything else, if you force someone, they're like, oh, I'm good.
Yeah, they push back.
But also just personal things is just keep making stuff in ZBrush, keep getting better. keep pushing myself as an artist. I did that rock challenge recently. I couldn't finish
That was
it, but I
fun.
did the rock challenge, and it was just a cool thing to do because I was like, yeah, I can make like 30 days worth of rocks. But I was like, I want to make like little miniatures instead. I mean, I've been able to make so many subtools and props and brush packs over the years that like I wanted to push myself a little further within an hour. So it was hard. It was really like after I was done with them, I would be very like exhausted, like to the point of like, okay, you gotta calm down a bit. You also have a job. Let's make sure you're not putting too much effort into something that isn't your job. But
I mean, I did see that, by the way. I was like, when I first saw this, I remember your first rock was really cool, and your second one, I was like, that looks weird. Why does that look weird? And then I saw that you put it in a fish tank, and I was like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. Like, that's why it looked weird. That was very cool.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I haven't explained like the scale of this. Everyone's like, what's wrong with this proportion? That's how I felt too.
Yeah.
But
I tip my hat to you because it made as soon as you explained it, I was like, makes complete sense. Buy it, completely buy it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's doing stuff like that. Just I love Zbrush a ton. I should have worn my hat. I had a Zbrush hat.
That one's cool. Nah, dude, that's your brand, dude. Come on.
That's my dog. Yeah.
but
yeah.
Dude, we're gonna have to wrap up. I really appreciate taking the time to come and talk. I know you're a busy dude. And I have to say, on retrospect, yeah, just as good a guest as you were two. It seems like Sony Santa Monica has really good podcast guests. I have to work my way through the rest of your group.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Just have every person.
Yeah, just have just like what's GDD doing this in 2021? Oh, we're just doing Sony, like Sony Santa Monica. That's it. Like we're just tackling everyone. Yeah, dude, we're gonna wrap. Everyone listening, remember to do this usual like, follow, share, subscribe. The more the podcast gets shared, the more the people that get to hear the fantastic information that Danny has to share. But dude, we're done. We're gonna wrap. Thank you so much, and I'll catch everyone next week.